let's mash the buttons and go to work. 1, 2, and now 3. All right, now if I've done this successfully, we are yet again live on the internet. Oh, I think I did it. Cool. I think I did it. So, all right. Hello, welcome. If you are hanging out and checking this out on Twitch, thanks so much. If you are checking this out after the fact on YouTube, thanks. I hope wherever you're checking this out, if you would do me the great favor and honor of subscribing or following on your respective platform, that would mean the world to me. The race to 50 in terms of followers on Twitch continues. I am getting there, and I'm really excited to do this. I'm always thrilled to be yammering into this microphone. And overall, I look forward to any opportunity I have to talk to writers about writing stuff. And tonight, as you can tell by the really nifty graphic, I swear to you took more than 2 minutes to make. Tonight, we're going to talk about making a plot and making a world. And my goal, I think I need to make this goal clear up front. My goal is to sort of make these two parts of storytelling more interesting. Because typically, for a lot of people, they have no problem whatsoever coming up with a character. They know exactly the kind of character they want to make. They know exactly the kind of character they want to have. They don't have any problem whatsoever thinking of that stuff. And maybe by extension, they don't really have too much of a problem thinking about an overall plot. They can come up with something to accomplish some bad guy to fight, again, with no difficulty. And maybe there's a slight little wrinkle, a slight little difficulty in trying to figure out how the protagonist, the character they make, connects to the bad guy, connects to their plot. But on the whole, those two things usually come pretty quickly for a lot of people. And it's the world building that, well, frankly, it gets shafted. It gets just kind of like pushed off to the side because, well, there's just enough description, there's just enough world building, there's just enough creating so that you have a rough picture in your head of the big idea. It takes place in a city, it takes place in a kingdom, it takes place there on a spaceship or in between planets or whatever. But on a more granular level, it's kind of hand waved. It's just it's space. It's just stuff. And if that's not the case, usually in our story, what we refer to as the story triangle, which is the confluence of character, plot, and world, sort of they make 3 points, make a triangle with your fingers. Jay-Z and Kanye will love you for it. Generally, when one of those points suffers, the other two suffer proportionally. Because if your world building is just all out of whack, then it won't matter how amazing and creative your plot is or how wild and detailed your characters are, because it'll seem like you've got these really complex people essentially working against like just a flat single color background. It won't feel substantial the way you mean it to. And if your characters are really weak, then it won't really matter if your plot and world are super detailed, because it'll just seem like, well, they're just kind of going through the motions. It's just kind of yawn, stretch, okay, I guess they're just doing stuff. And conversely, if your plot's really weak, you'll have these incredible characters potentially, and they'll just be doing stuff, like running errands on a Tuesday afternoon or on an early Sunday morning. They're just going to do stuff, and then they're going to go home and, put on football or something and do very little. I want to try and prevent that as much as possible, because tonight, especially more so than other Monday night lesson chats, whatever you want to call them, I want to definitely point out that this is the sort of stuff that if you're looking to get published or if you're looking to self-publish, either way, an agent or an editor is going to look for this. This is what they look for. They look for strong world. They look for strong plot. They look for strong characters. And if you're self-publishing, the strength of your story triangle directly translates into generally high star and high rating reviews, because you've taken the publisher out of the equation, but you're going directly to the consumer. You're going directly to the reader. And obviously a better book gets higher reviews, which in turn feeds the algorithm. And because the algorithm gets fed, then ideally, depending on how the algorithm is feeling that day, ideally it leads to more readers potentially seeing your book and making the decision to buy it. And then everybody wins when, I guess, capitalism happens, comrades. The important thing here is that it sounds like this stuff is all super critical. And it sounds like, oh my God, I have to do this perfectly. And what am I supposed to do? Oh my God, I can't have any weaknesses. I better paralyze myself with all these decisions. Oh my God, this is so hard. This is so much. It is a lot. Like, this is generally when you start working with a writer and you start talking about publishing, or whether it's self-publishing or traditional publishing or whatever, you run into this sort of gap. And I think we've talked about it in some writers' chats on Wednesdays. You run into this gap where, when you're just writing to write, when you're just, what I would casually refer to as fucking around. You're just fucking around trying to I'm just telling a story. This is how I pass my time. I do this on my lunch break. I do this on my weekends. It's fun. It's escapism. It's no big deal. I'm just doing it because I like telling a story. I'm a writer, you guys. At that level, when you're just in the act of producing without any sort of idea of the next steps, there's a lot less pressure on you as a writer. You can just make and create, and you have just an absolute truckload of stuff. And this is how you run into manuscripts that are in 4 and 5 times the size of stuff, because you just go nuts. Whereas once you start learning that there are extra steps and that you have to sort of scrutinize your work and detail your work, and that especially if you're going to go traditional in your publishing route, there are definite things and boxes you need to tick, and a roadmap for your story to get from where it is now to where you want it to be. A lot of writers can feel like, oh my God, all of a sudden this got very difficult. Oh my God, this got so super tough. What am I supposed to do? And yeah, that's sort of what you signed up for when you decided you were going to do this to a degree where you could make some income. That difficulty, that assumed challenge, is the thing I'm going to do my best to make sure you rise to. And I'm going to do that by ideally explaining, yes, time zones. Hello, everybody in chat. It's really, did I not put the time zone in the tweet? Yeah, it's 7 p.m. Eastern. It's really nice to see you. Hi, everybody. Hello, chat. Chat, say hi to YouTube after the fact. YouTube, I guess, say hi to chat in comments, because this is only for the moment going on Twitch, and then tomorrow it goes loaded up to YouTube the old-fashioned way. It's okay. I'm totally not good at time zones either. Literally ask anyone who's ever hired me, because, oh my God, it's a mess. Also, I'm going to point out, because I see some people in chat, they're swearing tonight. Just, a heads up, I'm just going to fucking be me. So buckle up, kids. So where was I? Right. The idea that when you're doing a thing and you're going to, it's Twitch warned you. Cool. That means I had it set up right. There's this gap I want you to cross, and I want you to cross it smoothly and easily, because all of a sudden, oh my God, this turns into work. Yeah, you're not going to be able to swear in chat because, I don't want you swearing in chat. That's for me. Get your own microphone and start your own channel, and then you can swear, to the nth degree. Yeah, the mature warning. It's me all over. I really should make that my next t-shirt, shouldn't I? I have to file that away for tomorrow when I have slightly not 9 meetings during the day. But I'm going to finish this point, goddammit. Yeah, it's super double standards. I am nothing if not a giant hypocrite. I am nothing if just not garbage. Yes, more t-shirts when you say things. Everybody who doesn't know, everybody on the internet, hey. Amelia is the reason why I have many awesome shirts. Just so you know, it's all on her. The cool stuff happens, and she says stuff. And yes, I am nothing but a giant hypocrite. Would be an excellent t-shirt, maybe a magnet, because apparently I can make magnets now? That was the email I got this morning? Neat. You can fill your swearing quota. Yeah, that's cool. Fill your swearing quota on Twitter. Because, I don't have a quota. Mainly because I'm a white dude, and the internet lets me get away with everything. So I'm going back to my point now, after a long detour. Hi, everybody. Long detour. I want to close that gap between, oh my God, I didn't realize this was difficult, and hey, I was just trying to do this to have a good time. because I see that gap in gaming. I see that gap in podcasting. I see that gap in writing. I see that gap pretty much in any creative effort with human beings. Because, yeah, at some point when you decide you want to press this thing further and see where you can go, difficulty scales often very quickly. And in writing, it comes down not from knowing the steps in the writing process. Oh my God, I wrote a book. Now what do I do? Those steps by comparison are a lot easier than, oh my God, how do I write this book? Or how do I make this game? Or how do I make a podcast that, more than one of me will listen to? Whatever that thing is, that difficulty curve is what I'm going to try and collapse and what I'm going to try and make easy for you by breaking what are actually pretty intense, complicated things down into tiny itty bitty steps so that no matter what it is you're writing or what it is you're making, it'll, make sense for you, hopefully, in theory. If you have questions, fire away in chat. I'm all ears. I'm here for 2 hours. Let's do this. I noticed that very mildly my chat has exploded because I've broken double digits. So, good times. Hi, everybody. The first thing I want to talk about, because honestly, it wasn't the starting point I had when I was thinking about this during all the things I was doing today. It kind of came to me like 5 minutes before I pressed the start button. I want to make a difference and a big distinction between series or seasons or however you want, long form versus short form. Because the plot itself is the same conceptually. It's going to have all the same parts, all the same steps, but it's going to be stretched out. And one of the big, giant, like super huge size red flag things is that a lot of people, when they're in the middle of, oh my God, I'm going to be an author. Oh my God, I'm going to make a thing. Oh my God, I'm going to be able to buy a house and Oprah will talk to me. And then other famous people will do famous things near me. When people start feeding the dream and it accelerates proportionally from there, one of the things that goes right out the window, long gone out the window, is the overall idea that you need to subdivide your pieces and you need to portion them out effectively. Because a lot of people can come up with a single plot for what would be a story and then decide to take it like taffy at the shore or wherever it is you vacation or cotton candy, I guess, and just stretch it. One story stretched across, 6 books, 5 books, 10 books, 20 books, however many books, or one premise stretched across multiple sessions of a game for my gaming friends out there, does not necessarily mean it fits or that it works, because it just doesn't always work that way. Sometimes your story is finite, meaning it has definite ends to sort of a very clear starting and end point that if you were to stretch it out, it just becomes really apparent that you're padding everything and drawing it out unduly, like, an uncomfortable lunch date or dinner date with family members. It's just sort of awkward until everybody's done chewing. Again, something I want to avoid as much as humanly possible. The interesting thing here is that it's a really fixable problem, disgustingly fixable, oh, I didn't realize that's how we fix it sort of problem. Here's how you fix it. Figure out the number of steps it takes to start and end. And if it has a lot of steps, you can split it. And if it's short, it's short. And sometimes that's fine. A publisher or editor or agent is conceptually, theoretically, abstractly looking for series potential. That's the phrase you see tossed around on the I swear to you it's always correct and never lies to you social media. Series potential. What that means is that if you were to continue these characters doing more or less some stuff similar to what they're doing here, you could make another book. It does not mean that this plot in this book needs to be stretched into multiple books. Can it? Yeah, I guess, suppose. If we have to go fight a noseless British villain, sure, we can stretch that out over a couple books. But it also doesn't mean that it has to. If we have a detective, we can have multiple cases across multiple books. And then all of a sudden we can ruin the series when we become a fascist who wants to suddenly power scale up our fantasy, and we sort of lose the detective part because all of a sudden now we're a modern questing knight. Gosh, I wonder how that happened. Cash the paycheck. The interesting point there is that it's about understanding your size when you start out. Like so many other things in this world, you have to know how big a thing is in your hands before you do anything else with it. Because writers only want one thing, and it's to organize a decent story, which is sometimes itself disgusting. The important point here, I'm going to wait for the delay to see if anybody chuckles at that joke. The important thing here is that you know going in what it is you're trying to do. I'm going to make a single book. It'll be slightly open-ended conceptually. I'm not killing off all the characters and calling it a day. I'm leaving it a little bit open so that if I want to make a sequel and build a series, it's built around the characters more so than the plot, because you'll have more flexibility if you build around the characters than the plot. Gamer, if you're looking for your gamer conversion, you're going to build around the mechanics more so than the specific setting. Because ultimately a setting, as we'll talk about when we talk about world building later, settings have inherent limitations, whereas mechanics can be interpreted in a number of ways. There's your distinction. What we're looking for, what we're trying to do when we're building a plot is create boundaries first. This is going to come up a lot. Create boundaries and limitations first so that it defines the perimeter of our creative space, and then generate opportunities within to fill that creative space. If we work the other way around and we start making opportunities, and who gives a shit about boundaries, you will run into a situation where you end up culling far more than creating, where you just have, oh my God, I just vomited out a bajillion things and I don't know what to pick and I don't know what works. And it's just, I just have so much. And I want to stop that, because it's immediately fixable by before we got that far, before we jumped in that deep, before we committed that way. The thing to do is to sit there and go, yeah, I don't want to be a chaotic mess. This is not, John in his early 20s. I want to be somewhat intelligent about this, like John, not lately. The important thing here is that when you are shaping a plot, you have some sense of limit. Because if you can enforce and create one limit, one fence for the raptors to test, one inviolable thing that's a given that you're not going to screw with for your plot, you can go in any direction thereafter. What am I talking about? Let's suppose you're creating a Star Trek story. We'll just use Star Trek for my example. Let's say you're creating a Star Trek story. You know for a fact that it's Star Trek and not Star Wars. So there's a boundary right away. It can be that simple. There's not, we're not going to rock out with Spock and a lightsaber. We could. That's a different story for a different day, for a different thing, probably a different discussion entirely. I'll make a new graphic for it. But on the whole, we want to define our limits so that we have opportunity from it. So we start making decisions. What kind of story am I telling? And we can start with genre umbrellas. Oh, it's a horror story. It's a mystery. It's a romance. It's a Powered by the Apocalypse game. It's a Heroes Unlimited derivative game. It requires a slide rule and an abacus and I guess some cocaine. You create a lot of different opportunities by making those fundamental decisions about what a thing is and what a thing isn't. That's step one in making a plot. Yeah, deep cut. Heroes Unlimited, deep cut. I can go deeper. We can talk Arduin if you want. I can go even deeper. We can talk about any of the D&D clones in first edition. Like I can go OSR, not by choice, but we can go deep. We can go hella deep. So I am just showing off. It's a massive nerd game flex. It's a different story. I'll tell that story on Wednesday. Anyway, we figure out what a thing is and what a thing isn't. We can identify it first by genre if we want. We're not limited by genre. It's sometimes very helpful because genre puts us all in sort of a very common vocabulary for things. And it gives us an idea of what other limits we have. If we're telling a horror story, it is very unlikely to be shaped the same way as a political thriller or a legal thriller because it's a horror story. Or if we're telling a heteronormative romance, we are most likely not going to have a space opera also happening because especially for cis heteronormative romance, it's very, earth grounded, where our biggest decision is like, hey, it's occurring in a city, that kind of thing. The decisions you make, whatever decision it is, the decision you make must serve two purposes. It tells you what isn't going to show up, and it tells you what can show up. So if we're creating Star Trek, we know Star Trek can show up and Star Trek related stuff can show up. And we know that Star Trek is not a legal thriller. So we know it can't show up. Those limitations are really important because as we get more granular from here, we can sort of keep ourselves in bounds and keep the things in our decisions and our efforts moving. One of the major problems as we're developing a story from the ground up is that everybody kind of gets paralyzed by the weight of things, the mass of things. Oh my God, I have to do this. Oh my God, I have to do that. What about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? Again, this is where organization comes in. This is where making some clear decisions, because writing is the act of making decisions. Why is that not a t-shirt, John? File that away for later. Anyway, we figure out some ground rules for the plot. The same concept of figuring out ground rules is also the first rule for world building, but we're not there yet. So we figure out some ground rules. Now, plot as a whole, no matter what kind of story we're telling, no matter how big it is, no matter if it's a series, no matter if it's a single book, no matter if it has like 45 fucking characters, no matter if it involves a pointy metal chair or a terrible 8th season, or everybody takes their pants off, or oh my God, this person has a crush on that person, or whatever. Plot is driven by conflict. The potential for conflict, the realization of conflict, the absence of homeostasis and balance, all of those conflicting things that are opposed to one another for any number of reasons or any number of possibilities. There are good guys and there are bad guys. You know, people wearing white hats, people wearing black hats. It's the renegades and the law of binding up. Yes, plot is driven by conflict, not pants. Only terrible things are driven by pants. If you ever want to have fun, if you ever want to find like joy and happiness in your life, the second thing you need to do is ask, do I have pants for this? Do I need to wear pants for this? And it's going to make a substantial difference. File that away for later, kids. So, once we take pants out of the equation, because honestly, we don't need pants for tonight's discussion. It's a Monday evening. Let's go. Some of you are, well, all of you are just amazing. So let's lose pants and keep going. The thing we want to do, we want to figure out two parts of conflict. Unless the conflict is over pants. That's a very good point. If the conflict is about pants, and maybe we'll use that as our example, then we have to take this conflicted item, pants, and figure out what facet of it are we fighting about. Over what, if pants is our object, our MacGuffin, what can we say about pants that's generating this conflict? Every MacGuffin, whether it's the Ark of the Covenant, or pants, or the Holy Grail, or the V'ger space probe, or the magic kazoo, or the who knows what, as the fabric wears thin. That's a deep, deep metaphor. Whatever it is, there's some facet or some dimension or some way to view this item so that it is the source or potential source for conflict. The Ark of the Covenant shoots, Jesus beams out and it'll allow the Nazis to Nazi everywhere without having Lindsey Graham in charge. If it's, pants are causing a source of tension, well, what do we know about pants? Now we're going to do some combination plot and world building because these two things generally tend to nest pretty effectively. So maybe it's, the creation of pants or the wearing of pants is some kind of world building caste system. The pantsless people are all the cool ones, and the pants wearers are, suckers who are trapped in a system that is slowly crushing them. Maybe, who knows? That sounds good. Let's go with that. Again, one of the important elements that I don't think I say enough, but I need to, is that when you're the writer, you can never make a mistake that's inherently wrong. Because you're the one in charge. You get to determine what's right and wrong. You can write something down right now on the page and go, yeah, all right, I'll come. If it needs to be something better, I can make it better later. But for now, right here, it's fine. You made a choice. Boom. It's your permission you need to seek, so why not give it to yourself and say it's good enough? Don't overrule yourself. Don't self-reject here. This is just about generating the stuff from which the story will later be extruded. So we have our conflict. and we're looking for our conflict and a way where we can set it up initially as a binary, one side versus the other. This is one of the only times I will ever talk about a binary as a positive thing, because most of them aren't. But here, our binary is at least a starting point. We have one side versus the other, A versus B, this group versus that group, and us versus them. This is called a central axis conflict, because it gives us some sort of way to orient. When you get stuck, when you get lost, when you are talking about a game, when you are talking about a book, when you are pitching your stuff, when you are talking to your friends, when you're trying to figure out what the hell you're writing, if you ever need to, you go back to that central conflict. It might mean you say the sentence over and over and over until it's just sort of, mushy in your face, but it does ultimately come down to, oh, this is what this means. Cool. A central axis conflict does not have to be limited to a binary, but the more binary a central axis element is, the easier it is to make the good guys very good and the bad guys very bad, because binaries are really clear cut in terms of what they are and what they're not. And for a lot of writers, for a lot of story structures, for a lot of story ideas, there's nothing wrong with following this binary rather than immediately rejecting it, just because they think it's too simple. This time, right now, when we're starting our plot discussion, simple's okay. We can do simple. Simple helps. So we find some facet, some way we can set up opposition or conflict. Now, sometimes this conflict, whatever it is generated by one side's need or want versus another side's need or want. Now, sometimes it's need versus need, as in we both need the factory that the pants are made in either to exist or not exist. Sometimes it's want. One side wants there to be more factories. That means bulldozing the malt shop. Whereas the other side's like, no, fuck pants. Pants are stupid. Anybody who wears pants should be, dragged and lined up against a wall, and trust nobody, who wears pants. Then it's want versus want. Sometimes you want versus need. And that's where we get underdog situations. That's where we get situations like, I don't want to wear pants, but the man comes in and says, I gotta wear pants. And now all of a sudden we're like in a footloose pants situation, because we're just covering our legs, but we really just want to dance with Kevin Bacon or something. The metaphor got a little away from me there, but the idea remains that so often when we're building a conflict, we're looking at want versus need, or need versus need, or Leg Loose. Leg Loose is good. Yeah, he was also really good in the Lord of the Rings series. I love the way he snowboarded down steps with blurry CG. Want versus want, need versus need, want versus need. There's always going to be some kind of 1 versus 2 binary. I don't know why the footloose isn't the banning of shoes. That would seem ideal, because that way the foot would be loose. I don't know. Those bastards. What did John Lithgow ever do to us? When we're matching our want versus want, or our need versus need, or vice versa, we are trying to find... Oh, I'm going to show off, man. I don't have any other chances in my life to flex. I am a lonely, tired old person. So anytime I can flex with the vague hope that somebody out there is like, I think John's cool, I'm in. I'm in so hard, because I never got past that stage in early teenage development. Anyway. We set up our want versus want, need versus need, need versus want, want versus need. And we're trying to set it up so that we can find the conflict quickly and then frame a character around it. Because it doesn't do us any good if we have a conflict and we can't figure out how to attach a character to it. The reason why we have to go fight the noseless British villain is because that guy killed our parents when he was trying to take over the world. So we have an invested reason. That reason is called a hook. It's what hooks or connects. Mostly you see it as hooks, though, today. Hooks the protagonist to that plot, whatever it might be. You're going to need a hook. Every protagonist, I don't care if you have 22 point of views. I don't care if you have a giant ensemble in a kingdom. I don't care. Every character needs a hook. If you can't come up with a hook, they don't need to hang out in the story. They're just extra. Now, if you've got secondary characters, like you've got your Alfred the butler, or you've got your Robin sidekick, or your Chewie, or something, the hook isn't going to be as direct, but you'll have an indirect hook because you're connecting to a character before you connect to plot. Much like, the seven things of Kevin Bacon, where we don't directly connect, but we have to go through different hops. Well, your indirect hook is how many steps away from the plot you are. You generally want to keep your indirect hooks in smaller quantities than your direct hooks, because otherwise the plot just seems kind of like, oh, it's that thing in the background. Hey, look, everybody, it's the plot. It's going by like a bus. We want to stay more invested in a plot. This brings us to plot scale, because once we have a hook, once we know how to connect the dots, the hook does bring you back, which is, I don't have a lo-fi version because I'm trying not to get a copyright strike, but yes, the hook does bring you back because it's amazing. That's what hooks do. Or they fight Robin Williams. Take your pick. The important thing overall is that when we are shaping and forming these things and we're hooking the characters as we need, we are figuring out how big a deal this is. The greater the number of characters directly affected, the greater and more superlative the stakes, the danger, the possible rewards, the bigness of things, the harm it could cause if it doesn't go our way, the overall hugeness of the deal is what scales a plot. And if it's the biggest thing possible, if it affects the most number of characters we care about, if it's the biggest deal because, oh my God, the giant purple raisin monster is going to come and snap his fingers, and then all the characters we like are just going to poof away, because it affects so many people, that is very clearly the A plot, also called the main plot. Now, it's a main plot in a single book, and if we stretch it across multiple installments, it's a series plot. And if it's going to be stretched to a series plot, it takes somewhat of a background thing for a moment, because even in a series, there has to be an individual book plot to go with it. So yeah, we're watching the Marvel movies, and they all feed together towards, getting the Infinity Stones and taking care of the big purple guy and then becoming TV shows. But individual films, even the shitty ones, have their own individual plot. Sometimes they just involve Natalie Portman and some messy CG. We make do where we can, I suppose. The important thing here when we're scaling our plot is to count the number of people directly affected. They don't all have to be affected the same way, but they do have to be affected in some way. Ideally, you want them all affected, or the majority affected, in more or less the same way. They're all going to die. Gotham City's going to explode. Because that way you get a sense of urgency. The more people we can categorize as being affected, the bigger deal this seems, the more urgent we need to fix it, because maybe one of our characters, the ones we like, are the ones affected. Who knows? But you want to try and balance this so that you have a lot covered by your plot. It's not going to do you any good. A publisher will reject you so blindingly fast if your plot, you say you have, let's say, 10 characters, 10 points of view, and you're hopping around because you're writing the next great pointy metal chair sword epic, and the plot only really seems to affect 2 of them, and everybody else is just along for the ride. That's not so great. We want to avoid that. We want to make sure for our biggest plot, our A plot, our main plot, the most number of characters, not necessarily all of them, because some of them are going to be secondary characters, some of them are going to be sidekicks, some of them are going to be, just people who get killed off in a couple chapters and they're minor to some degree. But the most number of people are affected or potentially affected by this plot. Now, of course, obviously, if you have one protagonist, then they're going to be affected, and any extrapolation is going to seem like just a big deal to them. Oh my God, if we let the people, figure this out, we have to stop the Nazis from getting the Ark, because, well, that's just really bad. How early do you want to establish the size of the plot? You're generally going to try to establish your plot in terms of the thing that I'm going to spend the rest of the book on as you exit Act 1 into Act 2, because figuring out and seeing the scope and the assumed scope of the plot, because you can always make it bigger as we get and develop it, but a rough ballpark of the plot is what transitions us from Act 1 to Act 2. So pretty early in a story, pretty early in a manuscript, pretty early in a game, GMs. You want to make sure you set the conditions so that the story moves forward in your campaign, around your table, in your session 0, in your early to mid session 1s. You want to make sure you are establishing, hey, this is the thing you guys are going to do. This is the heart of the story. This is the conflict that the heroes are trying to accomplish things in order to obtain their end, whatever their goal might be. That stuff, that idea, is better decided early for you, and then in the book, on the page, the bridge between Act 1 and Act 2. But you, creatively, should know what it is going in, because you can deploy it as early or as late as you want at that point, the better, clearer vision you have of it. So once we scale our plot and go, this is our A plot, we can split our A plot into 2 types, because we're all about labeling things in publishing, because God forbid we just have an easy system for organization. A plots are split into 2 types, macro and micro. Macro A plot is often what gets confused with series plot. It's more or less the same thing. If you really want to split hairs, they're very different on some level. But for the most part, it's the big picture. It's going to take us 21 movies to go fight Thanos. Big macro involves the most number of people, the most number of individual stories, the most amount of effort, the most steps, the most fill in the blank, the most stuff. It's the most number of games in the tournament for our team to win. It's the most number of characters who have to work together to win the race, whatever. Macro means big, and it means big on purpose. Micro, the other side of the coin, scales down. It's smaller. It includes and hooks fewer characters than the macro does. Sometimes it's the same characters. Sometimes it's the plot between characters 1, 2, 3, and 4, whereas the macro is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And a micro plot is a kind of subplot. A subplot, just so we're clear, is any plot that isn't the main plot. It's sub because it's subordinate. Pretty straightforward. The critical element there is that as our plots decrease in the number of characters involved, what increases is how important it is to the character or characters that are involved. So a B plot, a character arc plot, that really only pertains to one character. For that character, it's essentially, it feels to them like it's the A plot. Oh my God, this is my chance to finally tell that person, I have a huge crush on you. Now, in the grand scheme of things, it's just one thing that one character has to do. But for them, it's everything. And they'll be nervous, and they'll have indecision, and they'll act in certain ways or not act in certain ways. And to them, it's a very big deal. One of your most effective things that will absolutely impress and improve your writing craft and make publishers and editors and agents go, oh shit, this person can fucking write, is your ability to make those micros, to make those subplots feel really, really critical. Now, compared to the series plot, oh my God, we have to go fight Thanos, the idea that, oh my God, those two people, he likes her and he's afraid to say so, or he hopes she likes him, or her, whatever gender assignment for people you want to use. I'm using a hetero one because I'm about to make a hetero point. You want to make that thing feel like a big deal to that person, because the reader, here's where we go, the reader is just one person, and they're connecting to your story because the macro plot sounds cool, but the micro plot, the subplots, is the stuff they can relate to. In their lives, whomever they are, wherever they are, presumably they're also human. They've also had a crush on somebody. They don't know how to verbalize it. They've also had a bad day at work and have just thought about running away and becoming a barbecue master. Or they've thought about how to make nail polish at 11:30 at night because they want to figure out what else to do with their lives. if you make your micros, you make your subs feel important. Now, you accomplish, how do you do that? How do you make it feel important? You spend time and space on the page in it. It is not necessarily like I'm going to give you every chemical detail for, oh my God, here's how we make nail polish. I'm not going to show you the formula for acetone, reader. But what I am going to do is express it to you in a way where you're like, oh, that's a big deal to that person. They're spending a lot of time and space on it. What you dedicate page space to, the reader is going to assume is a big deal. And when you don't spend page space and word count on a thing, the reader is going to assume it's not a big deal. So even if you skimp on describing a really important thing, the reader's going to see that and go, well, you just said a sentence. You know, the good guy kicks the bad guy off the building. Oh, okay, sure. He kicked a person. It's one sentence. And then you moved on. To you, you might have had this tremendously cinematic picture in your head. But if it doesn't come across that way, if you fail to deliver that picture to the reader's brain, how are they going to know? They can only go by what they see, and what they see are the sentences you write. With a microplot, we're tailoring it and shaping it to the person doing it. Even if that person isn't a human, even if you have an alien or a robot or a Wookiee or a librarian or a paralegal or a plumber from Brooklyn who's going after a white woman who falls down a pipe into a world of turtles, whatever. The microplot is what's going to allow the reader to pay attention, and the macroplot is going to offer potential to them. Oh my God. If he wears the giant raccoon onesie, he's going to be able to fly and do stuff. It's going to be super cool. But he's ultimately doing it because he cares about that strange lady with the long flowing hair who's always wearing a dress, but it never gets dirty. This issue is what helps divide macro from microplot. And when you're trying to get published, you got to be able to balance these two things. And yes, your book, I don't care what genre it is, I don't care how big it is, should have a macro, an A plot, and at least one microplot. If you're wondering how many microplots can I have, count your total number of point of view characters, take a third of it, round down. Do I mean the lady secretly in love with the evil king? Yes, I do mean the lady secretly in love with the evil king. I do. Because that's a whole different thing. I should talk plot twists. You know, I might do plot twists tonight just because I'm thinking about it now. But for now, we are creating plot scale. A plot, main plot. If we expand it, it can be a series plot. B plot, subplot, microplot, all the same thing. Are the plots that affect fewer characters than affect the A plot. Also, the other major distinction is that the rewards and risks shrink compared to the scope of the story. If I only have one point of view character, no micro, you get one. You can't have zero, or you shouldn't ideally have zero, as long as you're writing as your age of your reader increases, the number's one. You got to have one, a B plot. Often for a lot of things, it's a romance subplot or an accomplishment subplot where you're just doing something or changing something. The simpler, the younger your reader, the simpler your story, you're not going to have those B plots. Do talk about plot twists. Yep, we're going to talk about plot twists. We'll get there. We're not there yet, but I will talk about plot twists. As I ramble through this, I apologize. I'm working on my delivery. It's been a long day. But I'm so glad that all of you were here. Thank you so much for checking this out. If you're just coming in, as I see one of you is, hi. I'm covering plots, and then we're going to do world, and then we're going to piece all this shit together. Let's fucking go. Well, I'm so glad I've taught you a lot already, because I'm not even there yet. So here we are with our A plot. We stretch it out. It becomes a series plot. We develop our A plot in terms of the conflict it represents. And we divide our plots based on the number of people totally invested, number of people totally at risk, totally involved, totally who have a stake in the thing. If you have a big-ass plot and it's supposed to be a big goddamn deal, it better involve a number of people. Because if it doesn't, it's going to be really hard to get across to the reader that in a story where you have a dozen characters, only really 2 of them have anything to do with the plot, and the other 10 are just doing their own thing. It's not going to feel like a big deal when 10 of your characters don't give a shit about the pointy metal sword chair, but 2 of them do. The readers, you know what happens in that case? The reader just reads the chapters from the person they like. Happens all the goddamn time. And when that does happen, publishers do this thing called rejection, where you're done and booted out the door. Good luck, try again later. Also, it's a great way to not get notes from a publisher. They'll just say, it wasn't for us. It's not what we were looking for today. And move on with your life. And you're left sort of decoding like, well, why didn't they like my shit? Chances are, structurally, it doesn't have, stuff. My subplot deals with the main character trying to live up a family legacy. Does that sound solid? It sounds nice. It's a nice subplot. It's a development subplot. We're going to talk about subplot types in a second. Yeah, it sounds like a good one. So there are different we're just going to awkwardly transition. John is still the king of awkward transitions. You should actually try having like an actual conversation with me. I transition so poorly. There's like a bajillion. There are 206, I think was the last count, different subplot types, different character types, different B-plot types. And that's stuff like a revenge plot, a development plot, a gain plot, a loss plot, a grief plot, a growth plot, a hope plot, any kind of plot, and really all these labels. No, it's totally fine. I'm really sorry you're at work. We should liberate you one day, comrade. The really important thing when we identify it's a fill-in-the-blank kind of plot, that's the concept at the heart of it. That's the thing in the conflict. A growth plot is a plot where the conflict has to do with a character needing to grow. A grief plot is a character needing to deal with grief. A loss plot is a character having to deal with loss. Usually the distinguishing thing being grief being the loss of a person and loss being the loss of an object or a skill or something. You can divide your plots by that rule in any number of ways, however many times. You can even do it for your A plots. The Infinity Stones, the entire Infinity Saga for Marvel, starts off initially as a gain or a material accomplishment plot. Hey, we're going to get Infinity Stones. And then it turns into a resistance plot. Oh my God, it's Thanos. And then it turns into a conquest plot. We have to stop Thanos. But then we can individuate all the other stories where, we have a pretty straightforward, we have to go fight the bad guy, which is pretty typical in superhero stories. And that can turn into a personal growth plot. Oh my God, I was this little scrawny kid, and now I'm, Chris Evans. Or, I wish I was as cool as Han Solo. I am the objectively least good Chris, and now I'm in space with Bradley Cooper as a rodent. You can scale these things and organize these things in loads of different ways. Knowing how to best connect your main plot, your A plot, to your B plot, your micro plot, your subplot. If they are similar, if they are related, if we can nest one within the other, you are strengthening both when you do that. What am I talking about? Like this. Let's suppose you are in charge of a misfit sports team. Doesn't matter what sport. Pick your sport. Doesn't matter. You're in charge of a misfit sports team, and it happens to be the sport you played as a child. And because of how you were treated, because of the abuse you suffered at the hands of the evil coach, or the struggle you had where you couldn't believe in yourself, you abandoned, we'll use hockey. Hell yeah, we'll use hockey. Let's go. Because of the abuse you suffered at the hands of your coach and the way you felt when you weren't able to live up to the unrealistic expectations of that evil coach, you abandoned hockey and instead adopted all his principles as your own, and you became what is casually known as a huge asshole. However, when fate intervenes, as fate is so oft wont to do, you are now put in charge of a misfit team, and your effort right off the bat is to make this misfit team fit your style, the style you have, the one where you are a giant asshole. And it doesn't work. And as you soften, and as you become more true to yourself, and as you shed the problems you are having, and you become less of a dick because the kid from Dawson's Creek and his mom brings it out of you to be a better person, all of a sudden you become a much better coach, and you are able to turn around this misfit hockey team so that they can become a Disney appropriated property and then turn into a series. I went to high school with a couple of those kids. The interesting thing here, other than the fact that I went to high school with some of those kids and I knew them, as like actual children, the interesting thing here is that the personal growth arc B plot for our main character is mirrored in the personal growth plot of one of the Pacey from Dawson's Creek or Peter from Fringe. His arc is a mirror. It reflects to our main character something the main character went through. That's called a mirroring arc. If you can pull a mirroring arc off, it looks extra special spiffy. But it's the same arc repeating itself. And the idea that you need to be true to yourself and it's not all about winning and it's not all about perpetuating the abuse cycle allows us to also win the championship game. So it's the same arc, mirrored, reflected, and repeated. So it feels like there's a lot going on. It feels like it has all these, very different things, but in fact, it's the same thing layered. And if we can pull anything off with layers, we're off in a better position. Likewise, when we are deconstructing a story, much like when we are going to have a really good time with other humans, we want to reduce the number of layers we have. Come on. Somebody somewhere, one of you chuckled at that. One of you did, and I love you the most. The important point. Yeah. Thank you for getting it. I appreciate you so much. Okay. The important thing here when we are developing this plot, once we figure out what the it was a sex reference. Once we figure out what the conflict is, once we figure out what it isn't, then we need to figure out how it fits into the overall rest of the stuff we've made. How do we bring an antagonist into this? And there are, as we've talked about, I think it was 3 or 4 Mondays ago, there are 2 kinds of antagonists. There are antagonists and antagonistic forces. An antagonist is a being, a human, a robot, a personification, a thing, a guy, a lady, a boss, a CEO, a landlord, an evil cyborg. We can point to it and it has a name. It's a being. Whereas an antagonistic force is not personified. It's the volcano exploding. It's the fact that Tom Hanks is marooned alone on an island with a volleyball. It's it's the coming winter. It's the fact that you are stuck in the Andes and you have to eat your soccer players. Your antagonist doesn't have to be human. Sometimes it's a giant shark trying to eat Roy Scheider. It's just that we can point to an antagonist as a specific actor against your protagonists. There's somebody or something, some creature, some monster. It's the guy in the hockey mask. It's the guy with the scissor hands. It's the monster under the bed. It's the clown in the sewers. It's whatever. It's some singular being we can point to versus a force of nature or a concept. The distinction we want to make there between those two things is that if we give it a person, if we make it a being and we can directly oppose it, then we have an easier path to a climax. Because we just have to go confront them. We have to go lightsaber our dads. But if we make it an antagonistic force, and we don't have the ability to point to a person and go, that's the bad guy, and we just say, hey, I got to get off this island. If it's an antagonistic force, the challenge, the conflict, the thing driving the plot is still internal to the character. I don't know if Tom Hanks can make a raft, you guys. I don't know how he's going to survive. Antagonistic forces turn the conflict inward because it comes down to the character having skills. Because if a character doesn't have a skill and that skill is the thing that's going to keep them alive, they better learn how to do it or this is going to be a real short story. Whereas if it's a singular antagonist, and it can be an extra person, but there has to be at least a person. You can have a bunch of goons. You can have, the Sinister Six. You can have, the Decepticons or the, various Klingons or whomever. But they can be a group, but you still have to have one Ricardo Montalban there to sort of be the figurehead of this. But they can have any number of subordinates. We will probably cover characters, protagonists, and antagonists next Monday. because that shit gets deep in a hurry. But if we have an antagonist, we can position them. It's called seating. We can seat them in our plot so that the plot has a way to maximize the conflict. We have to prevent the Nazis from getting the Ark. Well, we better have one Nazi against whom we can compete for the Ark. Sure, we can make a big broad thing and just go Hitler. But unless we want to have Hitler directly in our story, we need a different guy. We need that French dude. Or we need the weird bald guy with the creepy hand tattoo. We need a guy. We need somebody. If it's an antagonistic force, we need to make it clear that the potential failure is the thing driving the story. Oh my God, I don't know if he can build a raft. I don't know if he can survive. I don't know if Tom Hanks can, cuddle up with a volleyball and then figure out how to crack a coconut open. Those distinctions in creating your antagonist help figure out how quickly your plot develops. If your protagonist doesn't know your antagonist, like they have to discover it over the course of the story, then what you need to work on is making sure the number of steps getting to your antagonist are clear. The big bad and the dragon. Yes, Darth Vader and the Emperor. In that case, Darth Vader is the goon, and the Emperor is the superior. If you and at some point you have to pass through both. Not necessarily in one story, sometimes in multiple stories, but you still got to pass through if you're going to subdivide out your goons and your number two guys, like your toughs and your smarts, depending on what gaming terminology you want to use when I talk about it. The important thing here is that because we've personified our antagonist, we definitely know, oh, that's our climax. We know at some point we're going to have to inevitably deal with this person. So we're already starting to anchor some of the major scene things in our story. We know this is coming. And then we can build to it because it's a lighthouse we can steer towards in the dark, stormy night of our writing. And if we have multiple guys, if they have, there's our smart guy and a goon, then we know a goon is a stepping stone towards the smart guy. And we can subdivide there. Well, there's 2 goons, there's 4 goons, fine, whatever. There's 5 goons and a major, whatever. We break our way through and move it piece and piece and piece. What about stories where central antagonists don't become a factor until a significant amount of time has passed? Do you mean we don't know the bad guy is the bad guy, but the bad guy has been working in the background the entire time? If the bad guy isn't the bad guy until a certain point in the story, the danger you run and the thing a publisher and an editor are going to wave a big ass red flag at is, why did it take so long for the bad guy to kick into gear? Yes, Breaking Bad was Tuco. Okay, that's an excellent question. The villain was always there. It's just the protagonist didn't encounter them. We figure it out when they call him Mr. Glass. Yes, the antagonist is always present, but our direct interaction with them comes later because first we got to set the stage to get there. You could have, your goons show up to deal your blue meth in episode 1, and it's sort of implied that they're there in episode 1 when Jesse asks Walt if he's, totally down to do this. Yeah, bitch. But it evolves from there. But we're not directly dealing with the room full of guys until Walt is bald and moving forward in the story in the last 3 or 4 episodes, whatever. Number doesn't matter right now. The antagonist is always present. Just because he's not in the story doesn't mean moves aren't being made that we don't directly see or hear about. So, for example, let's use a non-Breaking Bad. Let's go real simple. It's a murder mystery. There's a dead body that our detective is introduced to. Clearly, there's a killer. Killer doesn't have to be in the room. Killer doesn't even have to be in the area. Killer doesn't have to be involved at all yet. But we know there is a killer. There's a dead body. And we go deal with this first crime. While we are solving the first crime, maybe a second crime happens. And now all of a sudden it's serial. And it's a much bigger deal because now we have more clues and more potential. And we can start getting suspects from there. But the villain's always present. We're just not going to talk about him yet. That's fine. I wanted to cover twists before I move on, before we cover world building. A twist There are two kinds of twists. And when you mess this stuff up, it's what makes your stuff, it's what brings out the rejection letters. Two kinds of plot twists. There's a subversion plot twist and there's an expectation. We'll do expectation first. There's an expectation plot twist and an unforeseen or subverted plot twist. An expectation plot twist has to deal with the idea that we think things are going to go a certain way, and then due to one single action, it doesn't go that way. All we have to do is, make sure we trigger the bomb to go off, and we'll be fine. All we have to do is get this thing to happen. We just have to upload our virus to the mainframe, whatever it might be. The expectation either works or doesn't work, and that causes some tension. And when it doesn't work when we expect it to, we raise stakes and raise tension because the expectation doesn't go off the way we want. That's different than a subverted plot twist, because a subverted plot twist is where we take a thing we don't expect and it becomes a problem, like somebody's betrayal. Oh my God, the person who was with us the entire time suddenly turned out to be a bad guy? Bad guy McBadguyerson was really a bad guy this entire time? Who knew? Any sort of subversion or character relevant plot twist, generally what you're aiming for is any kind of situation where this sound applies. That's what we're going for. That's what we're looking at. Any kind of big, oh my God, you're generally looking to subvert rather than deliver on an expectation. An expectation and a missed expectation as a result just propel the things forward in a smaller scale. Oh my God, uploading the virus wasn't enough. We also have to, shoot the nuke at the alien. And all that did was just sustain things forward. Whereas, oh my God, bad guy McBadguyerson turns out to be a bad guy this entire time. And of course he's locking us away because he's been a bad guy this entire time. And that's how the bad guys knew to show up for the climax of the movie. That technically, yes, a savvy reader or a savvy audience member would see coming because we're so used to seeing these sorts of things. But the idea is we want to try and make the seams and the big neon sign not so apparent. What we're looking to do with a plot twist is challenge the reader to pay more attention. Hey, we're going in a certain direction, moving at a certain speed. I'm going to throw a wrench in the works. I'm going to change it up a little bit. Sometimes, if not a lot of time, a writer tries way too hard to be really clever with a plot twist. Oh my God, the reader's not going to see this coming. Oh my God, this is so great. I am so smart. SMRT, smart. Please don't do that. Just don't. No, it's cool. Just relax. You're going to twist something, have a function for it. Why are we twisting it? What is it? What the twist is supposed to do is recontextualize existing information. I thought this person was a good person. Now they're really a bad person? Everything I know is a lie. Wow, that makes sense why they were acting real shady as shit. Or I believe, as the kids say, sus. Yeah, sus. Right, and you guess the end of The Usual Suspects halfway through the movie because the coffee cup. Or the fact that he's standing in certain postures in certain parts and the way people look at him, or because he's piece of shit Kevin Spacey. The point here for using a plot twist is that it has to have a function. To twist for twist's sake turns you into the middle movie career of M. Night Shyamalan. Okay, Marky Mark is going to be afraid of trees now. Neat. You've made a mermaid in an apartment building. How happy, delightful for you. Oh no, your movie has the devil in an elevator. If the reader sees the twist coming, when is it considered a failed plot twist? And what else defines a plot twist? If the reader sees a twist coming, you have no control over it. Stop trying to make the twist so special and so unique they're not going to see it coming. Readers read more than you write. Some of them are going to see it coming. You just got to be okay with that. What you're aiming for to not see it coming is the majority of people elicit some level of surprise from it. But there's always going to be some percentage, and I don't know how much a percentage it is, but there's always going to be some percentage of people who are like, yep, saw that coming. The same way that when you watch like a Murder, She Wrote episode, the third person you see who isn't Angela Lansbury is 80-something% the killer. It's like that. What else defines a plot twist beyond that? You have to change some information you've already given. You've got to change the context for a thing the reader already knows or assumes. A good twist that works as a standalone plot point would be interesting without the twist. Yes, you should be able to, most of the time, take the twist out, and if your plot holds together, all your twist is doing is ratcheting things up. If you become reliant on the twist, there is probably at least one other weakness in your story, probably having to do with the hook you built for your main character to the plot. There are other possible hooks, but that's usually the first one an editor looks at when we're trying to shape a story for somebody. That's twists in a nutshell. You want to challenge the reader's understanding of existing information. I didn't know it was that person. Yes, you can disguise that by creating a red herring. You think it's character A, but really it's character B. And the way you do that, like we talked about before, is where you put the reader's attention. It's a little bit of sleight of hand. Where you put their attention leads them to think, oh, well, that's, it's a little too obvious. And you let them buy into that. That's fine. And then you deliver the reality later. That's a plot twist. Where this all goes and where we're going to spend the next, chunk of time. Well, it'll be on YouTube tomorrow because I'm trying to manually upload because I got told today that it was even easier than the way I did it the first time. Who knows? Otherwise, it'll be Wednesday. We're going to go back to dual streaming because I just like being able to press a button and going. But I'm giving it another try. Once you develop a plot, once you find the conflict, once you figure out whose wants versus whose needs, once you figure out what characters are, what skills they're using, and what drives and philosophies are impacted by the plot, you can figure out the world this stuff takes place in. Now, sometimes this world comes first because you get a really clear idea that, oh, I want the story to take place here. I need the story to take place in a big giant city that is at some point Newark, New Jersey, Camden, New Jersey, Chicago, or Pittsburgh. I need this story to take place in a small college town. I need this thing to take place in a town in the 1890s. I need this thing to take place in space next to SETI Alpha 6 or whatever. There's nothing inherently wrong or bad with starting with world building. For a lot of people, world building is where they like to hang out because there are really low stakes with world building. Plot, because plot inherently includes characters in order to function, can get a little messy because you've got to think, oh my God, now I have to have characters do this shit. Whereas a world, much like any sim game, is pretty open-ended. But building a world is critical because if you fail to build a world, the plot's going to lose some of that adhesiveness. It's going to lose some of that cohesion. Is it SETI Alpha 5? Sure. The one with Ricardo Montalban and Benedict Cumberbatch. Sure. Whatevs. Anyway, when we're building a world, we're going to start with much the same formula we started with the plot in terms of there are limits and opportunities. But instead of getting hard-nosed about, like how Tolkien opens The Hobbit. Yes, like how Tolkien opens up by explaining a Hobbit because he's setting sort of expectations. Yes, like that. When we're creating a world, we want to ground the reader in things similar to the reader's experience first. Perhaps you've noticed, even in the most fantastic Flying Dragon Pointy Metal Sword Chair series, nobody talks shit about gravity. No one cares about Bernoulli's principle for, flight. Okay. I'm whatever. I mean, either way, Chekhov's going to get an earwig and some raspberry jelly in his brain. It all goes to the same place. There are always going to be, when we're building a world, there is always going to be a set of things that are taken collectively for granted because we need them in order to function within the parameters of the story. So these are limits. They're called common limits or natural limits. And that's the stuff for the story we don't really want to get bogged down in, that the reader just has to buy into as just sort of a given, like gravity and oxygen and the fact that, you know, even our elves still look pretty human. Or for some reason, everybody in space, or most of everybody in space in Star Trek, is a biped. There are just givens. You don't want to question them. You don't want the reader questioning them. You don't want to have to spend an entire book's worth of appendices sorting out and describing, like, well, okay, so here are the angels and they turn into wizards, and some of them are like gods, but some of them are not like gods because there's these trees, and then there's lights in the trees, and then there's this lady. Like, you don't want to get bogged down in the extra shit. You can do that later. Do that way later. Do that like way, way later. Get a podcast and do that shit. For now, when you're just making it, when we're just sorting it out, there are going to be a set of natural givens that are just things you don't need to question because they're just there. It is sometimes helpful for some writers, especially writers who get very easily overwhelmed with all the things that are going on. It is sometimes very helpful to write them down, as in, it's like Earth, and then move on from there. It's Earth, but it has kingdoms and bigger trees. And that's fine. That's really fine, because in all these prep materials and all these documents, whether we're writing a first draft or we're writing a 60th draft, or whether we're making an outline, or whether we're using an Excel spreadsheet, or whether we're, you know, for some reason buying a book from a hack writing coach because they have a 15-step program when really like 5 steps would be fine, but you insist on spending $14.99 after spending $30,000 with a person who files you off for one 90-minute phone call every 3 months and calls that a job. Hey, you do whatever you got to do. But all the same, there's always going to be a set of givens that we don't want to question, we don't bring up, and they're just there. But you need to know what they are, because that way they don't have to come back up in the story. A lot of writers, when they're creating rules for their world, they come up with a rule and then they go, oh my God, this story is going to be the thing that challenges that rule. For example, we might have a social rule. It's another layer of rule we're going to talk about in a second. We might have a social rule that says, you know, nobody over the age of 40, nobody over the age of 45 ever survives, you know, the trek through the desert. And you might go, well, that's the plot, right? The plot is somebody who's 45 who has to survive the trek in the desert. And what you've done is a really common mistake. A really common issue that develops very quickly into a red flag. You've taken one interesting world building point and you've blown it up to be a conflict. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but it doesn't fit in everywhere else. We get to work with this one thing to the exclusion of the others. It's going to feel unbalanced. It's going to feel a little awkward. Now, sometimes this works because Denzel Washington was blind the entire time, and he has to go fight Gary Oldman as sort of like a sword-swinging cowboy because of a Bible. But other times this doesn't work because it's just about Sylvester Stallone being Judge Dredd. Yes, I did just compare the Book of Eli to Judge Dredd. You're welcome. The important thing here is to not gravitate towards one rule and then testing that rule as a plot. It can come up. It was absolutely, you know, possible. It can come up. But if you keep doing this again and again and again in your story, you know, there's this rule for this book and this rule for that book. By the time you get through your series, all of a sudden, all you've ever done is upend rule after rule. The central issue you want that's going to make your world feel lived in or real, which are two of the buzzwords that publishers and editors and agents are looking for, is consistency in the things that aren't questioned. There's an eagerness, almost on some levels, an immaturity when we're crafting a world and crafting a story where we just gravitate towards the first shiny thing, the first rule of a world, and we go fuck with it. We go make it a big deal. And, oh my God, ooh, shiny thing, and like a cat with a laser pointer. Ooh, there's a thing. What that sets up is, well, I'm gonna blank everything else. I put blinders on. And more writers fall into that trap, especially in a debut book situation. Because they think, well, it engages me, so it's got to engage somebody else. And they're right, but they're doing it to the exclusion of the other building they need to do. Consistency is your friend for world building. I will say that again. It's important because it's also important in gaming because it helps create atmosphere and mood. Consistency is your friend in world building. In part, that's going to be the common natural laws that you don't question, like gravity and oxygen and photosynthesis and the way, light works. But it's also going to come in the other layers of storytelling, like social rules, financial rules, sexual dynamic rules, power dynamics of any kind. All of those things, just about any kind of inherent conflict, any kind of opposition, any kind of difference maker between groups can be expressed as a world building rule. Some of those things are worth exploring as plots if you're not quite sure what your plot is or not quite sure what other architecture we can composite for a plot. But other times it's just there to facilitate a plot. For instance, if you have, a pretty straightforward uprising story where you have very clear haves versus have-nots, and our hero is a former have who gets relegated to have-nots, and he leads a ragtag party of people out of a forest to shoot bow and arrows at other people in order to take the money from the wealthy and redistribute it, comrades. Well, then you're affecting multiple different rules of your world for the sake of developing a plot that suggests something. The thing that your plot suggests, because of the rules of your world building, is, for the majority of times, your theme. Theme is a lesson the reader can take away from your story and file away in their own lives. For example, if I want to be like this character, this character was a good example for me of standing up for what I believe in. Making sure to always sword fight the sheriff of Nottingham. Something like that. Themes are really important. You need a theme in a book. You need a theme in a book. I don't care what genre it is. I don't care if it's your first book, your fifth book, your 10th book, your first time in this genre. I don't care how big the damn book is. You need a theme. Theme is going to be one of the elements that ties your plot to your world and your plot and your world to your characters, because the characters are the ones who exist to do the theme, and the theme is brought out by the plot, and it all takes place because of the rules of the world. Theme glues story together. You can have as many themes as you want. Some themes are going to be better represented than others because you're going to spend more time detailing them, but you need a theme. If you're not sure what a theme should be, then look at the story and go, what lesson can a reader take away from this? Not just, that's how you can turn, Brad Pitt taught me how to make an explosive out of soap. That's not exactly a theme, but a theme of, reconciling the person you wish to be with the person you are so that I can blow up banks in Delaware and have Helena Bonham Carter hold my hand after I shoot myself in the throat. That's a theme. You need one. And your world building facilitates your themes more than your plot does. The plot is often a good tool for getting the theme across because it can be an example of the theme or an example of a situation where the theme is apparent. But on the whole, it's your world building that's most responsible for your theme, because how you structure your world conveys, these sorts of plots and these sorts of themes are available. If we're telling a story about how you have to plug into a matrix so that you can be a 7-foot-tall blue creature, and then Sigourney Weaver and your ragtag pile of friends, dance with wolves, but on a different planet because you're just giant tall Smurfs, the themes in that sort of story are very different than the themes of, I'm a small town sheriff on the 4th of July and there's a giant shark trying to eat my family. Your world building facilitates your themes. Your world building has a set of rules. Now, there is no conceivable way, unless you spend a vast amount of time detailing everything, there's no way you're going to have to map, or you're going to be able to map every rule in your story. It's just not going to be possible. The good news is no one is expecting you to. One of the things publishers and editors are looking for is a world that feels relatable because there's enough rules that go unspoken and enough rules or structures that are related to things I, the reader, can click with. So if you're creating an alien society, yes, it's alien and fantastic and it has lots of bells and whistles, but there have to be some components that are in some way relatable or similar to, or that you can use language I'm familiar with to connect it to my own experience. Because I, the reader, an editor or publisher or agent, am not an alien, despite all rumors to the contrary. And I'm looking for relatability. Now, part of this is going to come in from the decision making about, oh, these are the rules I'm going to talk about. But also it's, how am I going to talk about them? That how, on one level, is sentence structure. How do I write this stuff? Do I use a lot of big sentences? Do I go fucking crazy with semicolons? Do I make a lot of, do I make so many commas in my thing that the marker or ink or whatever on my comma key wears out, as is the case on my Apple keyboard right in front of me? Or do I write a lot of short, punchy sentences because I'm trying to establish a certain voice? Maybe it's just, 6 words, period, stop, over and over and over because I'm writing Perry Mason novels. How you structure the words, how you get those ideas across, helps create the relatability that makes your world feel realistic. And when your world feels realistic, your plot seems reasonable, even if your plot is batshit banana pants crazy. And if your world feels relatable and your plot seems reasonable, then the characters doing it, for the most part, seem engaging because they're doing stuff in the story and it seems to be making a difference. And all of that has hinged on the sentence structure, how you've written it. That's why writing, how you write, is important. That's why, you want to vary your sentence length. That's why you don't want to go nuts with punctuation. That's why you really don't want to be, parentheses all over the place, like your Bugs Bunny talking to the audience, breaking the fourth wall. You want to structure the words for this purpose. This is a biggie. This is another one of those, oh my God, this is what a publisher or agent or editor are looking for, but they fail to tell the writer because they want you to jump through hoops. They're looking for you, the writer, to craft words on the page so that when I read them, the understanding I have of those words in this sequence puts a movie in my brain. It fires up my imagination so I can visualize, and not just stiff, awkward flipbook animation, but smooth, 8K, 7.1 surround sound, super immersive visuals and audio. And I can engage as many other senses as I want, but it's going to feel like I'm there. When you shape it that way, when you understand that your sentences are everything and your structure is everything, and I don't just mean grammar, but your structure and your setup is everything, then no matter if we're talking character or plot or world, what we're setting up is your ability to make anything new. Oh my God, aliens. It's Ricardo Montalban in space. Or, it's a space hotel. Or it's, The Matrix. Or it's this or that or the other. It's relatable in some way because of how you've presented it. You might use, in-world vocabulary. It's a transporter. It's a photon torpedo. We are reversing the polarity of the emitter beam. But while I might not understand the techno-babble you just dropped on me, if you can express it as, by reversing the polarity of the emitter dish, I'm able to calibrate and scan for the particle we need, make it so, Mr. Data, I'm able to understand what the hell is going on, because context for a reader is everything. And the world building helps create context, because world building isn't just the big giant picture. Oh my God, it takes place in space. It's also the small stuff, like, oh, we're in the, the main room in the ship. We're in the engine room. We're in engineering. We're, 20 miles below the sea in the submarine. We are in the belly of the dungeon. We are at the heart of the maze facing down the dragon, whatever it might be. That's also world building, because again, we're trying to put a movie in the reader's brain. So wherever we're at, that's world building. Whatever we're doing, that's plot. Who's ever doing those things? Those are characters. It's just that we're looking at things in different scales. And when we're looking at things at different scales, what we're looking for are the opportunities for those characters and the opportunities to develop the world and the opportunities to expand and grow and accomplish our plot. And we're counterbalancing those opportunities with limitation. Some of those limitations are, for world building, environmental. Hey, those are giant ass mountains. We can't go that way. Like when we're playing a video game and there's the invisible wall that we just like, oh, that's the end of the map. Better turn around and go the other way. Sometimes those limitations for plot are just the plot is limited to some degree because it's the kind of story we're telling. It's a space opera. It is not going to have a whole lot of many scenes of complicated jury deliberations. It's not a legal thriller. It's not a sports underdog movie. So there's no, youthful, plucky protagonists overcoming a collective doubt. It's just, oh, those are aliens. We better shoot them with ray guns. And character limitations are fundamental weaknesses and skills because not all characters are perfect or should be perfect or need to be perfect. They can be flawed. They can be multidimensional. They can be really good people, but they just happen to suck at stuff because your readers, whomever they might be, are really good people, possibly, who suck at stuff. They're not good at everything. It's not relatable if they're good at everything. It's not enjoyable if they're good at everything. It's not relatable if your story can go in a billion, trillion, million different directions because you're not sure what somebody else will like. So you're, somewhat codependently crafting everything, hoping somebody loves you. Or if your world building is so hazy and vague because you don't want to make a decision and scare somebody off because you don't want to limit your story. You just want to say, oh, our hero sneaks in and accomplishes their task and sneaks out. And you didn't want to dial it down and you didn't want to focus anything because you didn't want the reader to get bored. When really all that is a fear you have that you don't think your writing's good enough to sustain reader attention. So instead, you're just speeding through everything and hoping nobody notices when in fact, everybody notices. All of this stuff comes together and other fun writing fact, no one, no editor, no publisher, no agent, no coach, no freelancer, no whatever. Nobody is expecting it to happen in the first draft. Writers might be because they're engaged in some kind of fake assumed competition with other writers. This idea that, oh, other writers are better than me, so I need to do better now, which is horseshit. It's absolute fucking horseshit. Here comes the swearing, by the way. Just big piles of fucking shit that we buy into because we're so used to telling ourselves that we're inadequate because social media grooms and curates the successes over the failures. It looks like everybody else is doing better because they only seem to be talking about what's doing better. And those of us who dare talk about anything that isn't perfection seem to be ostracized or assumed some level of failure or some level of inadequate when that is grossly not the case. But that is the poisonous nature of social media. It masks this concept. It masks this competition under the guise of, no, we're just sharing everybody. It creates equality. It's not equality. The point I'm trying to make with this is that pressuring yourself to get this all right in the first draft is a surefire way to wreck whatever you're doing. We can always make a second draft. You can always make a third draft. Yeah, it'll take a little longer. But that's fine, because ultimately if it takes a little longer and it leads to you doing a better job so that there are fewer problems down the road and whatever next steps you're on, you're only making it easier for yourself. Take the extra time to sort this stuff out. If you're going to get published, let's say you're going to publish it yourself, there's no reason to race. You don't get an extra bigger bonus from, or this is also true in traditional publishing, there's no bonus for getting done sooner. It still has to go to the same process. It still goes to the same length pre-order. It still goes to the same website. It's just happening on a different time. Oh, it's Tuesday instead of Friday. Great. It's still happening. Pressuring yourself like that is a great way to discourage you from actually making effort and from actually growing. And I think that's the point on which I'm out of scripted note material on my notepad. Thanks for listening to me ramble. I'm not leaving. I'm I'm out of notes. If you have questions, the mass of you in chat, hi, fire away. Absolutely fire away. I still have tea. I still have water. I'm here. And before you ask, my day was fine. Let's get that off the table. My day was fine. It was a long day. I'm tired. That's not the point. Bring me your questions about plot and world building. Anything goes. Or I guess if you don't have questions about plot and world building, ask me anything you want. I'm just sitting here hanging out. Otherwise, I will just begin to... Well, I want to lay out the schedule for what comes next. I know I need to do that. So many. I have one from the way beginning. Okay. I was wondering how you know if your story or book should be broken into a series. Oh, that's a fantastic question. All right, let's go. Here's how you do it. We talked about earlier the idea that how you subdivide your plot into components and how many components can dictate the size and scope of your plot. For example, if you have to, gather 7 things before you can go fight the big bad guy, there is a possibility you can shape that so that you have 1 book per each thing, and then the 8th book is the culmination of those 7 things to go fight the bad guy. So it depends on how you want to subdivide your plot. If your plot is not item intensive, if it's just a very straightforward conflict of there's these guys fighting those guys, or this is the conflict that the character is trying to change or affect, you can slow it down and stretch it out so you could make it a series. You just have to create more architecture to handle it. Maybe we got to add extra bad guys. Maybe you got to make it not so easy to accomplish. Maybe you got to start it but then not pay it off until later. That's fine. It's okay if you want to do that. Some stories, depending on what they are specifically, work better that way. But sometimes it's a straightforward thing of just, well, the plot's this big because it's only this one conflict. With plot, how important is originality? Or is that a useless fight and everything's been done? Also an excellent question. Most everything has been done. What distinguishes your plot from a plot 1,000 years ago is how you voice it and some of the particulars therein. Because, for example, the, questing knight story that's existed for over 2,000 years, questing knight stories still happen now, only now they are intrepid whistleblowers, claiming or fighting against corporate overreach. But that's no different than the knight, romping across the hillside fighting the giant. You've just changed the particulars, but the idea itself stays the same. Where you want your individuality, which is, I think, a better frame than originality. Where you want your individuality is how you take the core concept that's been done I don't know how many fucking billion times, and what makes it stand out that only you can do because of how you are approaching it. So, for example, a very bog standard story is, a romance story where one character wants to fall in love or is in love with another character. That story has existed since we were a collective society of storytellers living in caves and painting on walls. It's the number 2 story of all time next to the hunt accomplishment story of, hey, look, a mammoth, let's eat it. In a romance, the originality isn't, oh, this person loves that person. The originality is in, well, who is this person? Who is A? Who's person A to you? And who's person B to you? And how are they together? And where are they together? And what are you doing? And how are you framing this story? Because if we just go, oh, well, these are 2 star-crossed lovers from 2 fighting families. Okay. How are you framing Romeo and Juliet in a way that the person to your left is going to frame Romeo and Juliet differently? The sun is pretty bright and loads of things have been underneath it. Where you want to put your focus is on how you're going to take a thing that's already been under the sun and interpret it in a different way that is unique to you, not necessarily and specifically different from everyone else, though that can be a focus. But a priority for a lot of writers, especially nervous writers, should instead be, how do I tell this story so that I'm happy with it? so that it's a thing that is unique and identifiable to me. If I'm telling this story, what's my interpretation? What elements do I want to highlight? What elements on which do I want to focus? That helps your story stand out far more than, well, it's Romeo and Juliet, but this time they're Smurfs. Yeah, there can be some originality. You can combine things in new and different orders. But what's really going to stand out beyond the cosmetics or superficial stuff is how clearly your voice comes through, how clearly your craft is exposed, your word choice, your structure like that. Oh, this is how, you write words and create dialogue and create a pace and a tempo for your story that is different than how I do it, or how she does it, or how that person over there does it. Those differences are where you want to focus. Those differences are the thing you want to promote rather than homogenize. Good question. Publishers and editors are not looking for originality like, oh my God, no one has ever made Romeo and Juliet about two sentient refrigerators. What they're looking for is Romeo and Juliet. Okay. What makes this one stand out? Oh, well, this time it's told entirely through emoji. Sure. I'm sure that's already been done, but I think you take my point. You want to find how you can take an idea, whatever it might be, and where's your spin? Where's your view? Where's your facet? Where's your concept? Where's your fingerprints? And how can you bring them and make them more apparent? A non-writing example. I don't know if you know this, but there are loads of different brands of things. There's like a million different beer companies. There's about 5 or 6 different appliance companies. They all make dishwashers. They all make refrigerators. They all do the same thing. But what makes them different is how they look, how big they are, the particular method of their function. They all have knobs or buttons and they all make temperatures, but how we activate them and use them is different. The originality is in the specifics and in the interpretation more so than in the concept. I don't know why the lo-fi music suddenly became kind of pornish. I don't actually apologize because it's a little groovy, but I just sort of noticed when I stopped talking, like, oh, yeah, we're having a, it's one of those kind of nights where we just sort of pass the edible around and put the music on low. Excellent question. What's next? I do need one more light in here. Yeah, it's like half dark, which is fine. I don't care. It's more of a note for me when I'm re-listening to this, uploading it tomorrow morning. Now, somebody said they had like so many questions. Where are you at? Where are my questions? How do you build themes and plots into multiple stories? I'm assuming you mean, how do I take this theme and put it in multiple things? One theme in multiple books? Like in a series. I don't want you to pick the smarter ones. I want you to pick questions. They can be not smart. I'm not going to make fun of you. I want to help you. So how do you get themes and plots into multiple stories? You build each story individually. Or if you have one theme across multiple books, you divide it up just like we do with the plot. So we have a theme. Character, has to believe in themselves, right? It's the theme I use for all my examples. Character has to believe in themselves. We can spread that into 3 books like this. First book, we establish that the character needs to believe in themselves and they struggle with it. Second book, they know they need to believe themselves and they struggle with it a little bit more, but they learn to get a little bit better at it. Third book, they most definitely confront and deal with the fact that they need to feel better about themselves, and then they do. You take the theme, you stretch it out a little bit, you create instances for it to develop in thirds or quarters or fifths or sixths or whatevers, and then you split it up. I was going to say splice, but that's not the right word. You split it up into its constituent pieces and go from there. Or if that's not your cup of tea because you want to do something different, you can have the same theme appear in different ways across a series. In book 1, it shows up in one presentation. In book 2, it's a different. In book 3, it's a third, but they're all the same theme, just different elements and parts of it. I have another book that I started, and I kind of already asked you about writing from experiences. Yes, I remember that question. What do you do when you run out of things from your experiences to write about? I've watched movies and things, but I hit a block. See, that's not a stupid question. That's a good question. So, I don't think you've run out of experiences. I think you've run out of experiences that you've wrestled with mentally and creatively, but not emotionally. Because the next sort of pool to jump in, and I don't know if some of my gaming friends are still hanging out in chat, or if you're hearing about this after the fact, or you're going to, tweet me later and tell me about it. But if you remember me from gaming, this is the depth I used to run at, and I still run at, only now I run at it for stories. You've got to tap into the emotional part of things. You got to know how to feel, because you got to move that, because that's what's going to move the needle for the reader. So yeah, you've had an experience like I did X, whatever X is. And you can write about that from an intellectual standpoint. What up, gamer? You can write about X from an intellectual standpoint of I did this, I did that, it has this part, it has this part, this was the consequence, this was the result. And you've got some distance to it. You've got your arm kind of stretched out to it. But you can still dig deep into that and find the emotion, the fear, the panic, the worry, the anxiety, the tension, the relief. And then go, well, what other times in my life did I feel something similar to those feelings? The sense of elation about accomplishing a difficult physical skill mirrors what other sense of physical elation in my life? The joy I felt of, oh my God, I ran my first marathon feels a lot like the joy I felt when this other thing happened. And you're going to try to marry things together on an emotional level. And if you still are totally out of things that happen to you, you have to step out of yourself and think about them broadly. You felt excited when you won that marathon. Do you think somebody else who went through the same amount of struggle you did would be happy about winning the marathon? Great. What if we gave them more difficulties? What if we gave them fewer? What if we added some complications? All of a sudden, we're now no longer talking about your direct experience. We're modifying it for the sake of some made-up person. But we're modifying it all the same. There's always some you or your life element, however small, however singular, that you can draw on to extrapolate in a story. It's just that sometimes it's going to be emotional. Sometimes you're going to have to mirror a thing. Sometimes you're going to have to look at the opposite of a thing. You might have had a great sense of relief when you walked out of that bad relationship. But somebody else might look at it and go, no, I don't know who I am without it. And then all of a sudden we have a completely opposite, the negative universe, mirror universe world where you have a mustache and a goatee and you're living the complete opposite world life. But you've got to be willing to start from a seed somewhere in your own existence and experience. You will never run out of them so long as you are alive. It's one of the benefits of being alive. There's always something. Frustration, boredom, elation, fear, anxiety, tension, stress, routine, monotony, whatever. There's always some part of human experience that can be planted into other material to develop a story. It's not a dumb question at all. What's next? I might steal this for outro music. That's really good. Do I have advice for injecting humor into your story? I fear I'm too serious. Okay. Well, there's two different parts to this, really. If you want to try to make your characters funnier, like we want to just make your characters crack jokes, then you have to describe them in not necessarily in humorous ways, but having humor as a reaction. Have them laugh and smile more. Lighten up, Francis. Make it less of a big deal. The other thing to do is to change the stakes. Reduce some of the extremities on the emotional or activity pendulum. Oh my God, the world is coming to an end. Oh my God, without this, I am lost. Huge, big, giant stakes and danger. Slow it down. Don't swing so hard. Don't make it such a big deal. Not everything is life and death. Not everything is all or nothing. This is the problem with the binary we talked about, an hour and 36 minutes ago. You add humor by reducing the crisis and tension in the stakes. And you add humor by changing how a character reacts to a situation and by how the world reacts to the stuff going on and where you choose to put the reader's focus. So you might have a terrible travesty. There might be a huge car wreck in chapter 15. And there's all this different kinds of smoke and fire and broken glass and pain and suffering and all this heavy duty stuff. But if you choose to frame that as, something humorous there, like they're being chased by malevolent cannibalistic clowns, all of a sudden this feels much lighter in tone. Part of this is also a subjective opinion. You might be too hard on yourself, making this more difficult for yourself than you really are. And seriousness comes down to how you're framing the urgency of the story. You're making this thing, whatever it is, sound like a big deal because you want the reader to take you seriously, but you've swung too far. And then it's just a matter about dialing back the stakes and dialing back the tension. That's more of an individual issue than a collective issue. Or you just have characters be more sarcastic. You don't have to make every character Ryan Reynolds, but you modulate a little bit. You find the middle. There's a big-ass middle ground. Good question. When building secrets, oh goody. All right, so J.J. Abrams is my nemesis. We know this. And if you're a Patreon person, J.J. Abrams is my nemesis. When building secrets into a world, how do I keep them from turning into mystery boxes? A mystery box is a secret that goes nowhere. Like, Ray, I have something to tell you. It doesn't matter. It sucks. You prevent a mystery box by having a very clear payoff to it. Whatever your mystery is, whatever your secret is. You have a very clear payoff to it and a very clear route to reach that payoff. And then you make sure you deliver it. It's not enough just to say, hey, over here, I have a secret. That's a third of the journey. That's how we make mystery boxes. I have a secret, but I'm not going to tell you about it. I'm hoping you don't pay attention to it. What you want to do instead is have a secret, but then have something to do about it. Develop it. Make it an effort that a character has to wrestle with or remember, and then you pay it off. That's how you deal with it, JJ. The author should know what's inside the box. Yes, it's Gwyneth Paltrow's head. We should know that from the jump. We know that so that we can get to it, so that we can have the impact from it. Because if we're going to craft a secret for the story, we're hoping that the impact of the revelation of that secret matters. Because otherwise, having a secret is masturbatory. It doesn't accomplish anything. It's just kind of there. It's the payoff that makes a secret matter. Otherwise, it's just shit the writer didn't tell you about. So have a plan. Make sure it comes up again in the story and it matters, and it isn't just don't worry about it, Ray. It's fine. I'll go hang out with the only other black person in the story. You want to have it do more than the basics. Other questions? Oh, my pleasure. I love answering questions. This is what I do every Wednesday. If you're new and you're listening to this and you're wondering, hey, I have questions, where can I get answers? Come back on Wednesday. I do this for a couple hours every Wednesday. This is one of my great joys in life. If you have more questions, I have more time. Should I just answer some unspoken questions? Yes, you did look great today. I really do like that color on you. Yeah, I agree that one person at work, complete asshole. You're right. I do think you should stand up for yourself. No, you work hard enough. Maybe you should take a break. Yes, I would like to go to dinner. Thanks so much. Other questions? Other people? Do you think one should work? One what? Like a person? Do I think somebody should work on more than one book at a time? I mean, I only have the one monitor, and I can only write one thing at a time. But if you're talking about how can I have, like, yes, a person. Can I have multiple stories going and cooking? Yeah, you can. It's not inherently bad. It doesn't matter how many you start. It matters how many you finish. I mean, the world is littered with incomplete things that will never see the light of day. Part of that's going to be how we get better at what we do, and part of that's just going to be people not getting serious enough or not getting enough help or skill or craft or development or aid in order to accomplish their goal. Some people are just in the fucking around business. It doesn't matter how many you start. It doesn't matter how many you do at the same time. What matters is how do you finish them? How do you move forward? How do you figure out what your goals are? How do you figure out what your plans are? How do you capitalize on that? What do you do about that? No one cares. The internet, social media, the hashtag writing community loves to get into some kind of weird urinary genital measuring contest about how many projects I'm working on at the same time. Oh my God, pay attention to me. Look at me. I'm working so hard, you guys. And what that comes down to is just you're great at appearing busy. You're great at getting attention for yourself. That's a delightful skill. I'm sure that served you really well in like elementary school. But it doesn't matter how many projects you have going. What matters is whether or not you're getting any closer to your end goals. Or if you're just doing it because you like talking about it and daydreaming about it, and it's a kind of masturbation where you don't need tissues when you're done. It does happen to freelancers a lot. There's a lot of half-started projects in the world. There's a lot of just, this will be one day, this will be one day, this will be one day. And you just have to kind of roll with it and hope in the end some things pay off and some things don't. But yeah, you can start as many things as you want. I'm just going to do my best to help you try and finish them so that it gets easier the next time and the next time and the next time and the next time. With painting, I like to bounce back and back, or I get sick of something, but I worry I won't focus enough to get it done. Well, the good news is you're in charge of focus. Yes, I know there's a million factors that compete for your focus, and part of being a creative is developing the discipline to muster the focus you have when you can, but you're in charge. And yeah, sometimes some creatives need to bounce back and forth. Sometimes that's a great thing in many iterations. Sometimes, though, for some people, in some cases, it's an excuse. I'll just keep bouncing back and forth so that I never have to square up with the idea that I'm stuck or I'm scared or I don't know how to finish it. Something like that. That's one of those moments where you got to sit down and like deal with yourself and kind of own your shit. But it comes down to, what am I doing when I bounce back and forth? Is it because I want to keep myself limber, or I'm trying to accomplish a lot of stuff? Or is it just I'm afraid to end things because ending things is tough, so instead I'm just going to keep making new stuff because new stuff's exciting and working and developing is hard? That's a real common trap for a lot of people. Good stuff. Excellent questions. You're very welcome. Thank you so much for asking them. Anybody else? Yes? No? It's fine. I still got a mouthful of tea and half a glass of water. I want to give myself a moment of credit here. Hang on. So I'm doing this recording. You're very welcome. I'm doing this recording like, oh God, this is how long have I been talking? It is 10 minutes to 9. I've been talking for about 12 hours. There was a brief 45 or so minute break where I didn't talk and I tried to take a nap, and that just didn't happen. But yeah, I'm really proud of myself for still having a voice and having the energy to just go me. Good job, me. Hooray. All right. Is that it, everybody? Are we good? Shall I plug the pluggables? And yeah, it's, you know what? It's worth being proud of. Today was, I mean, it was a really good day professionally. Oh, man. It was a great day. And if you're on the Discord, you can find out why it's a good day later. But on the whole, hey, good stuff. All right. I think it's time to plug the plugs and get on out of here. What do you think? I think so too. All right. So, if, as the neighbor's dog goes berserk in my ears, if you want more stuff like this, if you want to, not just do world and plot and characters, but just stuff, I will be right back here streaming live on both Twitch and YouTube Wednesday. That's August the 4th. Yes. Wednesday, August the 4th at 7 p.m. Eastern for the Writers Chat. There are a dozen questions, all nice and set up to help us answer. Plus, if you're in chat for these things, you get to ask questions too. And my hope is to deliver 2 hours of writing education that you're not going to get anywhere else. Beyond that, if you love this stuff and you want to make more of this stuff happen, the best thing you can do is go check out the Patreon. Patreon.com/John helps you create. In theory, if I set it up right, there's a link now on the Twitch page. There will be a link on the YouTube when I post this thing tomorrow. So I'll make sure that link is there. The Patreon for $2 a month gets you, 4 different weeks of narrative breakthroughs and walkthroughs of movies, as well as really big, complicated story discussions. We try to have a good time. It also gives you access to the Discord, where you can go hang out with other writers and me. It also gives you, I should point out, a significant discount in getting an editor. Just saying. It's also a great place to find out what it is I'm streaming and what it is I'm doing next, and have some fun along the way. So that's it. If you like me and you want to hang out with me some more, you can find me on Twitter, twitter.com/awesome, AWESOME _ that's shift and the dash key, JOHN. I'm pretty sure the Twitter command works. It should. I thought it did. If not, I'll check it, but I just plugged it again. It's fine. So, all right, everybody. I think it's time to get out of here. I'm going to press the record button and see if it stops. And then we're going to do the stop stream button and see if it stops. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time. You are magical, wonderful, deeply attractive people. I think the world of you all. You're special and amazing. Thanks for spending 2 hours with me tonight. I look forward to seeing you again in the very, very near future. P.S. My birthday is Saturday. You're going to hear more about that on Wednesday. So I'll see you guys Wednesday. See ya! And the recording is over. So now I dial this down. Yes, I have to talk my way through this because otherwise I'll fuck it up. I dial that down. All right, that's it. Thank you for being here, everybody. You guys are great. I love you all. This is a lot of fun. I'm really happy. Please don't forget to tell your friends. Please don't forget to subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I'm marching my way to 50 people so that my cats can have consistent food. Sweet. All right, guys. I will see you later. Have a delightful evening. Take care of yourselves. Love yourselves. And I'll talk to you very, very soon. See ya.